Good morning. You're listening to Insurance Matchmaking, your path to health, life, and Medicare coverage with Matt Libby Insurance. And now, sharing his knowledge, here's your host, Matt Libby.
Well, welcome back to Insurance Matchmaking. I was thinking about what I was going to talk about today, and I think I need to start with the camper saga. And I say the camper saga, clients of mine who get my newsletter last summer got to read about the Texas saga, which I split it into over two monthly newsletters. Our trip to Texas, and we got caught in a really bad storm when we were in Tyler, Texas. And unfortunately, just recently, I think we found out that there was some storm damage that happened during that storm that we didn't really realize happened. There was a lot of wind, a lot of downed trees and branches, and I guess some of those might have punctured the roof. We didn't notice any, we didn't notice water coming in or anything, but we had a plan here. My wife, I've probably told you this several times, is a quilter. She came up with the logo, what's called the Tennessee Star. It doesn't look like the stars on the striped star on the flag, on the state flag, but it's a quilting pattern for a six-pointed star, and so we've adapted that and chose the colors on it, but the pattern was the Tennessee Star. And then she's made a couple quilts that are basically they're signs, and they hang in my office. I mean, people, who did the quilt? And of course, then I get to brag on her, and they think it's really neat. But anyway, so one of the reasons we got a camper was my wife likes to go to these quilt shows. And generally, anytime they have those, the convention centers or the hotels are just really expensive. And thought, well, we'd like to go camping, and we could have a camper, and she can go to the quilt show, and I camp while she's, I'm at the camper. I can work some. I'm at the camper in the campgrounds and work in a nice, what they call it, idyllic seating. And get those things done. So we've done that a couple times. We've camped in Lebanon, and we camped in Sevierville on Douglas Lake. There was a quilt show in Pigeon Forge that she goes to almost annually. But the mecca for her for quilt shows is in Paducah, Kentucky, and it's a big deal. And if you don't book your hotel or your campsite at least 6 months before that, you're not going to get a place to stay anywhere close to that quilt show. So she's booked the time, we've got the campground all set up, and we decided it was like, hey, we need to go ahead and get the camper checked out before. We know there was a couple of issues of things that probably needed fixing. And so we took it over here to Cookeville RV, had them check it out, and they're like, I don't think you want to pay to fix your roof. So it turned out that basically our camper was unrepairable. And this actually fits into insurance. It's not your typical, it's not the insurance I sell. I don't do the property and casualty stuff, but they said, you probably just want to turn this into insurance and see if you can get a settlement on it. And I'm thinking, okay, we just now discovered it. We think probably the damage happened back in last June. We may not cover it. So we bought a new camper. Weren't able to trade in the one because it had no value for trade. And I got the new camper. We were going to go camping last week in kind of our trial run, get used to this camper, figure out what things we need to do differently, and make sure we're not forgetting anything to take with us and take a short trip. So we booked last weekend to go camping at Standing Stone State Park. If you remember, if you're listening to this on this original air date, you'll remember the storms of last weekend. In fact, Standing Stone posted a whole bunch of pictures of all the flooding and the roads that were washed out and all the damage that happened at the park during those storms last weekend. So we were glad we weren't there. So we bought a new Grand Design Imagine camper, and it's actually shorter than the one we had, but it's actually going to, because of the way they design it, and it has what they call a Murphy bed. If you're not familiar with that, where the bed folds up into the wall and out of the way when you're not in the bed, it gives us more of kind of a living room space, and it really has some really nice counter space for the kitchen part. So we're really looking forward to using this camper, but we didn't get to make that trip. So we do have another trip scheduled. And in fact, when you're listening to this, I'll probably be at the campground. But I just kind of want to go over that saga, but also kind of tie that into insurance, because we were able to get a claim, and our insurance is basically bought our old camper and took it for salvage. So we didn't have that money for the down payment because of just in the timing. We wanted to get going on the new camper and be able to go camping with it. So we'll be able to apply that money to the loan, but didn't use it for down payment. But it's that when we talk about insurance, you don't get insurance after the fact. I couldn't have gone. It's like, oh, they say they can't fix my roof. I couldn't go to my Allstate agent and say, hey, I need to add this camper. I've got roof damage, and I don't want to pay for it. It doesn't work that way. You've got to have the insurance in place before it happens. So I just thought I'd kind of share that. Just kind of that personal interest of kind of knowing what some of the things we do. But we are looking forward. We're going to go to Cedars of Lebanon State Park. We camped there once before because there was a quilt show in Lebanon. So we stayed there. So we're looking forward, and it looks like the weather's going to be halfway decent. So get to do our maiden voyage with our new camper. And then in April, we'll be up in Paducah for the quilt show. It's one of those, I may stay there that whole week. I may come back home and work here. That's kind of up in the air. It's if I get to that campground and have lousy cell service, and so can't make my phone calls or get Wi-Fi, internet on my computer, I can't really work. I'd have to go somewhere to work, and so it may be easier to just come home for a couple days, be at the office, and then go back and get the camper when it's time to leave. Because I'm not going to see my wife during those days. She will be all day, and some of the classes she likes to do at those quilt shows actually happen in the evening. So we're not going to be together much that week. So when working with my producer this morning, we need to figure out when in April I'm going to be recording the show, because I've got a lot of stuff going on. I've got a business trip in the middle of the month, and then we got the quilt show at the end of the month. So we are going to be traveling a lot. So, but we will keep the show going. So like I said, I just kind of wanted to cover that bit about our little camper saga, but we are enjoying the new camper. And if you get our newsletter, we'll probably have some pictures and things posted either. Share those in the newsletter, maybe even share some on our Facebook. I'll probably share some on the Facebook page. So if you use Facebook, please go and like and comment on Matt Libby Insurance page. We do a lot of stuff on there. We post out, when we're doing our workshops. Monday the 24th, we will be doing a Welcome to Medicare workshop at the Putnam County Cookeville Library at 6 p.m. And also on that day, I will be doing a 2 o'clock at my office. And then the following Tuesday, I think it's April 1st. Let me look at the calendar real quick here. Yes, Tuesday, April 1st. We're going to be doing the 2 o'clock and the 6 o'clock, but both of those are going to be at my office. We're going to kind of testing out to see how that might work, because sometimes it's hard to schedule the day that I want at the library, and we haven't had big crowds lately, so sometimes it's a little easier just to have them at my office. I don't have to leave the office early to get set up at the library, wait for people to come in, and then if nobody comes, I pack up and leave. If I'm already at my office, I just continue to work, and if they show up for the workshop, then we go ahead and conduct it and go on. And just to put people's mind at ease, these are non-sales events. So even if it's at my office, we're still not going to sit there and try to talk you into buying a plan that day. It is an educational event, and that's how we handle it. We're there to give advice. There's no commitment to work with us, and that's one of the reasons too. We don't do the meals, because I don't want people to feel, well, they're obligated to do business with me because I bought them dinner. And then the flip side on that is I don't want to buy a dinner for a bunch of people that decide that never want to think about working with me anyway. So it kind of goes both ways. I know some people say, hey, you pay people to come eat, you're going to get more people to come, and then you're going to have more opportunity to sell. So it can go either way. I like doing it the way we were doing it. Doesn't mean I won't do a dinner seminar sometime. We'll see. But way I've been doing it has been working out pretty well. So that being said, I did want to kind of get into something that I brought up recently. Had a training session on Monday, and that I was being trained. I'm still learning. I know I'm 66. I don't know it all, and never claim to say I know it all. I know a lot. I don't know it all. But was talking about I've talked about before the cancer plan, especially for those that are on a Medicare Advantage. You know, it's really a great add-on for the individual. But there were some things come up in that training that I just really hadn't thought about. And we have what we call CHAS. And it's just an acronym for cancer, heart attack, and stroke. So there are plans that combine those. You can buy it as one plan. Sometimes they do it as like two separate plans. But basically the way they work is, one, it has a payout if you have cancer. If you get cancer, you file a claim, and you get this lump sum payment. And that always works. It works pretty simple. And then you also have the heart attack and stroke portion. Some companies will issue those as two separate plans, because when you file the claim on the one plan, it cancels that out, and then you don't have that plan anymore. So, but then again, some of them will do it as one plan, but they're kind of like the cancer and the heart attack stroke are like a rider to each other. So if it pays out one benefit, it doesn't mean you don't have the other benefit, and you keep that policy. And then some of the plans have what's called a recurrence benefit. So, the way that recurrence benefit works is it pays out, and this is for cancer. It's not the heart attack and stroke portion doesn't have a recurrence benefit, but the cancer section does. You can, once you've gone a certain period of time, whether it's 2 years, 3 years, 5 years after receiving cancer treatment, and then you get cancer again. And it could be a different cancer, or it could be the cancer you had before, just it came back after the doctors said, you were in remission. They always say the old 5-year thing was, we never say that you're cured if it any time less than 5 years, because it can surprise you and bounce back. So that recurrence benefit, and then some of them have, it's kind of like a sliding scale of, it's a percentage of that original amount based on how many years you went without having the cancer from the previous occurrence. So those are some things, the way the cancer plan works. And there's something, and I want to touch on the heart attack and stroke coverage. It looks like I'm going to need to do that after the break. I don't want to cut it short, but I'm going to go into why I wasn't offering that, and where it came up, and realize I may be doing my clients a disservice. And that's the one thing I want to talk about that. So we'll talk about that right after the break.
Need a little help with home repairs? The Habitat for Humanity Critical Repair Program is here to lend a hand. We're accepting applications now through February 14th for non-emergency repairs like plumbing, roofing, and more. Visit uchabitat.org and click the Critical Repairs Program tab to apply, or stop by our office at 1546 East Spring Street, Suite B. Don't wait. Applications must be postmarked by February 14th. Habitat for Humanity, helping you make your home a better place. Equal opportunity provider. Discrimination is prohibited by federal law.
Hey Tennessee, planning a home project, whether planting a tree or installing a fence, don't dig yourself into trouble. Underground utility lines could be just inches below the surface. Hitting one could mean costly repairs, service outages, or serious injury. Avoid risk. Call 811 before you dig. It's fast and free. Stay smart, stay safe, and call before you dig. Brought to you by Twin Lakes.
And now, back to Insurance Matchmaking with Matt Libby Insurance.
All right, and we're back. I was talking a little bit before the break there about the CHAS plans, the cancer, heart attack, and stroke, and wanted to go into generally, not that I have a problem with heart attack and stroke plans. I think critical illness plans are very useful, but for the people on Medicare, I would think, no, they don't really need it. The cancer plan, I see a big need for it. One of the things is if you have a Medicare Advantage plan, especially, If you chemotherapy, you have to pay a 20% coinsurance until you've hit the max out of pocket of the plan that you're on. So that could be a big expense, and that expense can happen, it can, depending on how long your cancer treatment goes, it could go into year 2 and year 3 of your plan, and you have to hit that maximum out of pocket each year. Whereas if you have a lump sum cancer plan, when you're diagnosed with a severe cancer, boom, they send you a check, and you put that money in the bank, and then you pay your medical bills, and you've got the money in the bank for the next couple of years to pay those medical bills. The other thing is, a lot of times with cancer, you're going to travel out of state to get those cancer treatments, or you're going to go, maybe you're paying for experimental coverage. And I know some people I've talked to a client that his sister was going and getting treatment in Mexico because there was a treatment there, and they're paying cash for it, but it's a lot less expensive than doing it here. And so that's something to consider. You have more options if you have that cancer plan to fall back on. But that being said, in my mind, I was thinking people don't really need a heart attack and stroke plan if they're on Medicare, especially if they're on a Medicare supplement, because those are most of the time are going to be a significant event, but it's not a long-term chronic treatment. Generally, somebody has a heart attack, maybe they get a couple stents, maybe they have valve surgery, going to maybe have some cardiac therapy after their heart attack, but it's a kind of a short-term event. And what came up in this training that I was in, and didn't even think about it, because one of the reasons we talk about the cancer plans have always been of the high cost of those cancer drugs. And of course, we now have a maximum cap on our the prescription coverage. But the thing is, you still have those issues of the formularies, of whether that is covered by your insurance company or not. And then a lot of your cancer drugs are the Part B, so you could still have a lot of expense there that you need on an Advantage plan is going to go towards that 20% co-insurance to your max out of pocket. So it was very important. And then, of course, on the drug coverage, there used to be no maximum out of pocket on the Part D. You were always going to pay at least 5% of the cost after you've already paid a lot. And so it made a lot of sense to have that cancer plan to reimburse for those expensive cancer drugs. But what hit me in this training, and I'm like, wow, I never even thought of it that way before, was generally if somebody has a heart attack or stroke, probably the first thing that happens is the doctor prescribes them Eliquis. Maybe they had a bypass and they put in a stent. They don't want your blood to clot now because of some of the issues you have or with some blockage. So they'll prescribe that blood thinner. That's about $600 a month for a supply. That's the cost of it. So if you didn't have prescription coverage, or you have a plan that has that Part D deductible, which currently is $590, so you would have to come up with that $590, and then you're going to pay a high copay on that Tier 3 drug until you've hit that $2,000 max out of pocket. So you're looking at having $2,000 of costs, and that's going to hit you every year, because generally most people, once they get prescribed Eliquis, the doctor doesn't take them off that prescription. So you're going to have that big drug cost every year. So again, kind of like I was talking about with the cancer 20%. If you get that lump sum because you had a heart attack or stroke, you now have money in the bank. And I recommend, of course, it's your money. You do what you want with it. But I would say put that in an account and say, okay, that account I am not going to touch except for my medical costs. And that way I know I've got that money for medical costs. That's up to you how you manage that. But that's one of my suggestions. So it has me looking a little different at the CHAS plans and not just kind of focus on the cancer. And generally, to add that heart attack and stroke and bundle them together, it doesn't raise the premium that much when you're doing the cancer and the heart attack stroke. Now, if you're only concerned about the cancer, yes, that's gonna give you a lower premium to pay. And most of these plans, depending on your age, you can go from $5,000. Usually, I think $5,000 is kind of like a minimum, from $5,000 to $75,000, or even $100,000 on some critical illness plans for if you're younger. Now, if you're in your 60s like myself, you're not going to get that $75,000. or you're not going to get to 100. You may get to 75, and you can. But again, it is a insurance policy. It can work like life insurance. One of the things is with these indemnity plans that we talk about is that they pay you, but you can also name a beneficiary. So if you have a heart attack plan and you have a heart attack and you go in the hospital and you don't come home from the hospital, you didn't make it, you can have a beneficiary on that plan and it can pay out like a life insurance plan. So that's something that simplifies things. The other thing is a lot of times people want, I mentioned the critical illness plans. The ones that kind of cover it all are going to ask a whole bunch of health questions, and they may ask, family history. They're going to ask about height and weight. They're going to ask about, do you smoke? All those little things like that can make that plan really expensive. The cancer plan is much simpler to get approved. Basically, it does have more than one question, but basically, do you have cancer? It's like, do you have cancer? Have you had cancer in the last 5 years? Or have you had cancer or had cancer treatments in the last 5 years? Because it'll ask about, have you been diagnosed with I think that's the way the phrasing on the plan I'm thinking of. Have you been diagnosed or treated for cancer in the any time in the last 5 years? And if you can answer no, it doesn't matter if you had lung cancer and they removed one of your lungs, but it was 10 years ago. You're treated like you're cancer-free. So that's why I say, just because you've had cancer in the past doesn't mean you can't get some of these cancer plans that I'm talking about. So I don't know. I guess I'm kind of doing a mission, and I think I've told the story on here on one of my clients that did get a plan, and the thing was, what kind of came up on that is I gave him two options. Most of my clients are usually looking for what's the least expensive, and I'd said, what do you think about this $20,000 plan? He said, well, no, I think I like the 30. And I'm so glad he did. Not because I got a little bit more commission on it, was because a month or two after that, he had an emergency appendectomy, and it was cancer, and it paid out that $30,000 for him. And he was worried about getting it for his wife, who had had cancer, 10 or 12 years before. It paid off for them. And if you think about it, if you do the math and multiply, hey, I'm paying $40 a month for this cancer plan, and you have that plan for 20 years and don't have cancer, you're still coming nowhere close to what it's going to pay out if you do. It's just you're paying on it. And that's one of the things I've come up, I've said about, you buy the insurance because you don't ever plan on using it. My car insurance, like I said, I think my wife, we've used it a couple times, for windshield repairs. But I haven't, knock on wood, I guess I'm probably going to jinx myself here. We haven't had a major car accident. We haven't had to claim anything on our vehicles. We've had some homeowners claims because we had some water damage in the home, not storm damage, but water pipe issues. One was a flooded basement from the water heater, and then the pressure regulator valve that the plumber put in to fix that about a year and a half later, the solder joint on it started leaking, and it saturated the wall. So we had two claims on the homeowner's insurance for that. Thank God we had it, because those bills were thousands of dollars that we just had to pay our deductible. And then the other thing was, as I mentioned, we just had this claim on the camper. I was more worried about, well, what happens if I get caught in the wind, or I have a blowout on a tire and I lose control and flip the camper, or I hit somebody. That's what I worried about having the insurance on that. Wasn't thinking, I was like, oh, you had storm damage and the roof is rotted and it cost too much to fix it. But I'm so glad I paid, for that insurance, because I didn't lose my shirt, so to speak. When it ended up having all that damage on the camper. And that's why I bring that up. The cancer plans, and I'm sorry if you feel like I've said, I'm not Jesse Flowers. I don't preach the gospel here, but I do preach insurance. And I just think a cancer plan's a great idea, because it's fairly inexpensive, and it's one of those things of, if you never need it, thank God. If you ever need it, you never paid anywhere close to the benefit you're getting out of it, and you're really going to appreciate it that you have it. One of the things is peace of mind. You get under a lot of stress when you're diagnosed with cancer. You don't know how your treatment's going to go. You're worried about, you're worrying about your family. You're worrying about if you're going to be around 5 years from now for your kids or grandkids. And getting that check can just help alleviate a lot of that stress. And we want to make sure that you're completely covered. Yes, this is how I earn my living. So I need to sell a lot of policies so I can continue to earn my living. But as I'm talking about my client, and this was probably about 5 years ago that he had this, because it was during COVID, because his surgery kept getting postponed because of COVID, because he couldn't go in the hospital because the risk was so high. So I know it was, it was 5 years ago that he had this cancer. It was before I moved to Cookeville, and he's still with us. I talked to them during this last enrollment period. We made some changes on their insurance. I've got loyal clients because I took the time to say, hey, you might want to look at this to go along with your other coverage. And they agreed, and they're very thankful that money came in and they didn't have to pay thousands of dollars to have surgery at UT. And that was one of the things, the other ironies we talked about, because I asked them, and some of the thing was the surgery, the appendectomy, the emergency surgery, and the stay in the hospital, and then the surgery for the cancer. Those happened in 2 different years. So on his Medicare Advantage plan, he never hit his maximum out of pocket. But thank goodness he had a hospital indemnity plan. He got reimbursed for the stay in the hospital. And because while he was in that hospital, the wife extended her stay in North Carolina because they weren't planning on spending more than a weekend there, and ended up spending about 2 weeks. So it was very handy for them to have that plan and be able to claim that and have those surgery costs reimbursed. So that's why we do it. That's why we recommend that you have those plans, especially if you have a Medicare Advantage plan. You should have something that can help you cover those big expenses. It's very inexpensive. When I talk to my clients that are turning 65 and they're debating between going to Medicare Advantage or a Medicare supplement, usually what steers them towards the Medicare Advantage, and it's not the free dental, it's not the drug plans included in it, it costs $0 a month versus $120 to $150 for just a Medicare supplement. I always encourage them, hey, consider a hospital indemnity plan, because the great news on those plans are they don't go up as you get older. Medicare supplements do. The other thing is the plan that I'm kind of pushing. I'm talking on this cancer one. When you're turning 65, when you get it at 64, the way they price that plan is 5-year increments is their rating scale. It doesn't go up, but it's like when you get the policy, if you're in a certain age band, that's what you're paying for it. When you get it when you're still 64, you're paying the 64-year-old rate, not the 65 to 69-year-old rate. So, or 69 to 70 rate. So that's the thing we want to look at. Get it before you turn 65, and you can get these plans at like 18 and up. So it's it's not just for Medicare, but it fits very well with the Medicare plans. And it looks like I'm out of time again for this week. Remember, at Matt Libby Insurance, we can cover you head to toe. It doesn't have to cost you an arm and a leg. And please go to insurancematchmaking.com. Click on the YouTubes there and like and subscribe and help me get the word out. And until next week, we'll talk to you later.
You've been listening to Insurance Matchmaking with Matt Libby, your path to health, life, and Medicare coverage with Matt Libby Insurance.